Hey guys, welcome to Ask the Vet. Sorry we're a little bit late. Yeah, everything's always chaos here, so it's been a bit chaotic. But yeah, welcome, and let's get started. So we've had some really good questions, which I will try to get through as many of them as possible. Obviously, if you have any of your own questions while you're here, just pop them in the comments and we'll see if we can get around to them as well. So first off, we had a nice question from Vicky. She was asking, how do you overcome some local resistance to euthanasia even when it's in the best interests of the animal? This is a really good question because obviously in the Western world, in the UK and in the US, euthanasia is very common for animals. It's very accepted. But over here, and I've worked in Cambodia before, and it was similar, their sort of culture and their religious beliefs a lot of the time don't agree with euthanasia at all, under any circumstance, because it's believed that you're making that decision to actively kill something, and that is not acceptable to them. And that can be really, really difficult. So a lot of this is about communication and education. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It's hard the times where you lose, but yeah, there's not really a huge amount you can do if someone is really, really adamant, and that is really difficult. But we are, with the right communication and kind of seeing people multiple times and reiterating the reasons why we suggest euthanasia. It's not just that we don't want to deal with the animal or that they can't afford it or anything like that. It is genuinely in that animal's best interests. And when you explain that to people, they do usually kind of come around, and people are getting more used to it here. And it's also something that sometimes, you know, if they're really not accepting of it, and we've had multiple chats with them, then sometimes we do have to say, like, we can't help you in the future if you're not going to accept what we advise in the best interest of the animals, because our first priority is to the animal. So it can be really hard, but we try and overcome it with communication, and being understanding. You know, we're working in their country, it's a very different culture. We have to be accepting of that, but we also have to put the priority of the animal first and the welfare of the animal first. Who is my favourite pup at the shelter and why? Not including Rum or Sky, obviously. Ooh, this is a difficult one. It changes every week. It depends if I'm inside, outside. I think my most kind of consistent favourite has been Katie, because she reminds me a lot of Sky. She is... she's got a very collie personality. She's very bouncy, she's very lovely, and she's just the sweetest little girl. She's come on some holidays with us in my van, and she really deserves the best home, and I think we have found a foster for her now, which is great. But she spent 5 years in this shelter, and so for me it just really tugged on my heartstrings when I first came here. And yeah, so she's just so sweet, and I love her. So she's my favorite consistent one. Currently, I think one of the dogs that I love seeing every morning is Bahadur. I hope I'm saying that right. It's Nepalese for warrior. And he came in last week because he was really unsteady on his back legs. We did loads of x-rays and I couldn't find anything orthopedically or musculoskeletally wrong on the x-rays, so I think it might be either a neurological issue or kind of a leftover from distemper when he was a puppy, possibly. He does seem to have improved a bit with Metacam, so it might be that there's something going on to do with his kind of spine or nerves that I can't see on x-ray or anything like that. So he's currently on once a day Metacam, but he lives outside, and he is just he's such a sweet dog, and he's just got this calm, assertive energy that he doesn't start fights, but dogs don't really mess with him because they know that he'll probably finish them. But he's in no way aggressive, but he's big, he's calm, he doesn't back down, and it's really nice to kind of see the interactions that he has with the other dogs and how much they respect him, and he's just such a sweetheart, and every time you go over to him, he just looks like he's smiling and he's so happy, and I love him. He's amazing. Right, Susan has asked, what are the most interesting cases you've dealt with? Ooh, okay. Well, this is going to take a little bit of thought. Most interesting case I've dealt with. We have a lot of wounds here that we don't necessarily see in the UK. And we've had a lot of orthopedics that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do in the UK. So they've been quite interesting to see how well these animals actually do in these situations. There's been quite a few wounds that I have the animals come in and I've been like, there is no way this animal is going to survive. And then with the wound management we have here, with advice from great other vets and the guys here that have dealt with it all before, they have done really well, and those animals are now kind of out and having great lives. Orthopedic cases, again, it's kind of situations where I've thought, oh no, this is going to have to be an amputation, and actually we've figured out we can do what's called a femoral head and neck ostectomy, and those, we've got a cat, Cole, he's doing amazingly with that, which is really nice. And we've done one recently for a dog, Alexa, so she's doing really well as well. And we've had quite a few entropions, so a lot of the dogs out here, good morning, Catherine. A lot of the dogs out here, the kind of Pishtar, which is the livestock guardian breed they have out here, they have really sort of what's called entropion, so their lower eyelids roll in and then they get kind of chronic eye issues. So we've done quite a few of those surgeries, which is really interesting. Very simple surgery, but very interesting, and again, something I wouldn't usually do in the UK. So yeah, I mean, I think if a particular case comes to me as I'm talking, I will come back to this, because I'm trying to think back over my time and think of very specific cases. But yeah, my brain is not remembering them all, but I'm hoping that if I go to the next question, then maybe something else will come up and we can come back to that one. What are the best and worst things working at a shelter compared to a normal vet? Yeah, one of the best ones is not having to have the money conversations with people. That's really nice. It gives you a lot more freedom. Obviously, I have to be careful about using resources and things like that, but I don't have to have conversations with people where I'm essentially telling them they can't afford to treat their pet, and that the only other option is euthanasia, because those were really hard in the UK, and money in sort of British culture is you don't really talk about it, and so to talk about it in situations where people are already upset and sometimes frustrated often comes across or is perceived in a negative way. And so and especially because we have the NHS in the UK, people don't really understand how much medical care costs, and obviously it's a big thing at the moment in the UK with vet prices and stuff, so that was always a really difficult conversation to have. And the situations where people physically had no money on them, and so you can't do what's best for the animal, because you're working for, you can provide emergency care and everything, obviously, but you cannot treat treatable things because they have no money. And veterinary care, when I was working at veterinary care in the UK, it was a business, when I was working for the corporates and things, and the independents, obviously it's still always a business. So that's nice here. It feels a bit more free for me to make decisions and treat things as I want to. without having to constantly say, oh, this is going to cost this much, this is going to cost this much. So that's quite nice. So in some ways it's nice not having to deal with clients. In some ways I do slightly miss that side of things. I miss making someone's beloved pet better and having them be really happy about it. I miss the problem solving of coming up with the solutions if people can't afford the kind of most ideal situation, things like that. But I don't miss having the difficult conversations with clients. That being said, we do sometimes have to have the difficult conversations with clients here, especially around euthanasia and things, but it's much less frequent. One of the more difficult things here is obviously the resources that are available. So we don't have unlimited money, and we don't have the option of referral either. So if things come in and I can't necessarily, like if they're a bit more specialist than I'm used to, or if I don't have the equipment to fully diagnose it, then we kind of just have to do the best we can. Or if we only have, trying to think, like, not necessarily the best ultrasound scanner, or we are kind of working with, we're not able to do complex orthopedic procedures and things like that, then obviously that can be stressful. And just kind of constantly worrying about whether we will run out of things. So if we run out of biochemistry tests, it takes 5 weeks for us to get more, and they're not always in the budget because they're expensive. So I have to be careful with those. So although there is a lot of freedom, it's not always completely free. And also here, people, the attitude to pets is very different. So a lot of people don't like animals. Dogs especially are seen as unclean in Islamic culture. So you see a lot of quite horrible wounds and things like that, which can be upsetting. And obviously the fact that you can't save them all, and sometimes you do have to make decisions based on resources available, or sort of long-term viability, that you kind of think, well, if this was in the UK we could save it, but here we can't, and that can be quite hard. But yeah, I think that kind of covers it. This is a much more stressful environment than in the UK in different ways, but apparently that's what I like. I think in the UK I get very bored of the monotony. I wake up, I go to work, I know that I'm going to see however many consults in a day, or however many surgeries in a day, and then I'm going to go home, and then I have to do it all the next day. And here, I guess there's slightly more freedom to kind of plan my own schedule during the day, in terms of I can book in as many surgeries as I want, I can book in as many kind of consults as I want, and yeah, it's more chaotic and more stressful, but it's also a bit more free, so that seems to suit me better. Another one from Vicky Martin. I know you've actually just said that you've got another question, so let me see if I can see it on my phone. Why is it not letting me see? Okay, so when did you know you wanted to be a vet? Ooh, okay. And then the other one you asked was, has the experience of living and working in Iraq been different to your expectations before you went out there? How do I think it's made me a better vet? And could I go back to normal practice after this? Yeah, I think the experience has been what I expected. I always knew it was going to be really hard. And when I told people I was going to move out here and do this, they all said, what are you doing? You have a great life in the UK. I was living in my van. I was working 3 days a week. I was living mostly in the Lake District in Scotland, so beautiful places. I had time to spend with my dogs and go hiking and do everything I loved. But I was bored. So I knew it was going to be really hard. And I said that to everyone. I said, I'm not going into this blind. I know it's going to be really hard. I know it's going to be stressful. I know there are going to be elements where I have to be really careful not to get burnt out. So it has kind of been pretty much exactly what I expected, which is good because that's obviously what I was looking for. The experience here has definitely made me a better vet. It's made me much more, I'm trying to think what the word is, because I have to organize my own time better, and we have to meet targets, and there's kind of a never-ending to-do list. I think it's made me much better at organization, because someone's not organizing my time for me, whereas in the UK they would, these are your consults, these are your things, this is when you take a break, this is blah blah blah. So it's made me a better vet in that sense, sort of the management, the admin side, and also in terms of kind of all-rounder stuff, because here it's me, it's Dr. Ali. We have one clinic assistant who we are training up. He doesn't have any previous medical experience, and we have a cleaner. In the UK, I would have, multiple nurses, usually 1.5 nurses to a vet. And there are a lot of things in the UK that I would not really think about as a vet that here I have to think about. I have to think about setting up the anesthetic machine. I have to think about the recovery of the patient, which sound really simple, but they're things that I wouldn't necessarily have had to think about in the UK, because I would have nurses to kind of take that role from me, and I kind of have to think about the clinic as a whole. I have to think about, procurement, my bosses would do the inventory and stuff in the UK. I have to do all that here. And also we have these animals as our own pets. So not only do I have to treat them, I have to think, when are they due their vaccines? When are they blah, blah, blah? We have to fit all that in. We need to go and check them, their teeth, everything like that, which is normally what an owner would do. I have to be on top of, have we run out of sterilized kits? Do we need to do those things? And those things were really hard for me in the beginning, because I just wasn't used to it. I just wasn't used to thinking about those little tasks that make my life easier, because I had other people to help me with those. So that took some getting used to. And I think I'm getting much better. But it's definitely made me a better vet in those senses, and also just in the clinical sense of I've seen a lot of things that I wouldn't have seen in the UK. I've done a lot of surgeries that I wouldn't have done in the UK, and yeah, so it's definitely made me a better vet. Could I go back to normal practice? Never say never. Yeah, never say never, but I think at the moment my focus isn't so much on what I want to do or where I want to be work-wise. It's much more on my lifestyle and what I want from my day-to-day life. So whether that's I want to be free and locuming, or whether that's I want to be in a difficult environment, challenging myself. I want to stay somewhere for a couple of years, or I want to be moving around a lot. I haven't actually figured any of that side out, but that's more where I make choices, rather than do I want to be in a permanent job, do I want to not. It's much more, do I want more free time, do I want to be in a challenging environment? I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's kind of more where I come from. I'm trying to see the rest of your question. Oh, here we go. When did you know you wanted to be a vet? So I took a bit of a long way around this. I always wanted to be a vet when I was a child. I always used to say to my parents, we lived in Cambridge, and I would say, I'm going to be a vet, I'm going to marry a farmer, I'm going to go to Cambridge vet school. That's what I wanted to do. And then I actually really hated science growing up when I was in school. I did it because it was what I needed to do to be a vet, and it was kind of what I was best in. But I always really loved kind of creative writing and things like that, but I was never very good at it. And so I kind of just kept taking the path of least resistance. I sort of gave up on the idea of being a vet when I did my GCSEs, didn't get amazing results, and I just didn't really like science enough, and I was kind of just not really thinking about my future hugely. So then I just kind of started taking the path of least resistance. So I did my A-levels, science-based mostly, because that's what I got the best results in at GCSE. Went to university and did a biology degree because that's what I got the best results in my A-levels. Did well at my biology degree, wanted to go into conservation, but kind of it was very difficult to get jobs in conservation, the kind of jobs that I wanted. So ended up in London for a couple of years, and then it was literally when I was watching TV, I think I was watching like Animal Crops Houston or something, and I saw this vet on TV, and I knew what I wanted from life was to be hands-on with animals every day, to make the world a better place, to be financially comfortable. So I don't really need to be rich, but I want to be able to support myself and live a lifestyle that I want to live, whether that's living in a van, and yeah, I don't really live an expensive lifestyle because I tend to live in cabins or vans or mud huts in places, but yeah, to be able to live the life that I wanted, whatever that might be, and to be free to travel. Travel's a big one. So I kind of was watching Animal Crops Houston, and I saw this vet on the TV, and it just sort of hit me, oh, I could do that, and that would tick all of those boxes for me. And I went in, and my parents were getting fed up with me because I'd graduated uni about 6 months before, and I was working in a shirt shop at the time, and they were like, why don't you just get a job? So I went into the kitchen, and I said to them, I think I want to be a vet. I think I want to go back to uni and be a vet. And they just immediately were like, yeah, that just makes perfect sense. That's what you should go and do. My poor dad was like, okay, guess I'm not retiring yet. And yeah, then I started working on it. I just missed the deadline for sort of submitting applications for that year. So then it was another 18 months before I started vet school. So then I started vet school in 2015 in London and graduated in 2019. And that is my story of how I became a vet. Why did I decide to do this role at Warpaws? That is also a bit of an impulse decision, one that I definitely don't regret. So it was New Year's Day. One of my friends had recently told me that she was moving to New Zealand, and that she was going to do this kind of big 6 months of travel and everything. And I was kind of having a bit of a New Year's sort of, oh, like, what is this year going to bring me? Just the same thing of like working in the UK and having a nice kind of quality of life and work-life balance, but sort of where's this going? And I'm a bit bored, I guess, and just, I don't know. Anyway, and then I'd had a couple of gin and tonics, and I saw this advert come up on Facebook for a vet in Kurdistan for Warpaws, and I just sort of applied on a whim. Didn't really tell any of my family what it was for. Got my brother to kind of help me with my cover letter and stuff, and then got a phone call about half an hour later from Louise, who, yeah, was very excited, kind of saying, yeah, this is what we do and everything like that. So I sort of said to her, let's take a couple of days, let's set up a proper meeting in a couple of days, and we'll chat about it properly. And went downstairs, spoke to my family, said, I'm thinking of moving to Iraq. And they just sort of looked at me and were like, you weren't thinking this an hour ago? And I remember sitting at the table and my dad saying, and I said, you're not really sort of saying anything. And he sort of said, and everyone else was saying, you can't do this, this is dangerous, blah, 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 blah. And my dad sort of said, look, I just know that if you want to do it, you can make it happen, and that's more scary. And I sort of said to him, listen, I'm not going to move to Iraq. This was just me throwing a little curveball in my day. And then a couple of days later, I sat down, had a chat with Louise, and came out of that meeting and went back downstairs and said, yeah, I think I actually am going to move to Iraq. And that was that. And then 4 months later, I was driving my van to Iraq with my dogs, and yeah, starting this kind of new role, this new life. And yeah, don't regret it. It's been tough, don't get me wrong. It was tough at the beginning. It's a new role for me. I've never been in a management role before. So to come from, like I say, you know, having my time organized for me, having just essentially being told, right, these are your consults, these are your surgeries. All I need to do is focus on the clinical side, the medicine side. Coming from that to a country where I'm dealing with people with very different cultures, a lot of the time who don't speak great English, and aren't, you know, well educated sometimes, or have very different views to us, into a management role alongside a clinical role, was very, very hard, but rewarding, very rewarding. And then I think, Catherine asked, do you think the attitude towards owning pets and animals in general is changing for the better in Iraq? I do, yeah. I meet a lot of people now who, when they find out I'm a vet, they'll be like, oh, this is my dog. A lot of people ask me for advice, and there are a lot more people who like owning pets. I'm trying to think if I've met someone who sort of actively doesn't like animals. I mean, I'm sure I have, but I've never said to someone, this is my job, and they've said, ooh, I don't like pets. I've had people be like, ooh, those are big dogs, or I would never have a pet. But certainly, yeah, pet ownership is growing. A lot of it is cats here, but dogs are certainly becoming a much bigger part of pet ownership here. Mostly small dogs. You get a lot of the sort of Pomeranians out here. And obviously dogs, you know, livestock guardian dogs and things like that. But yeah, a lot of them do have dogs now, and the attitude towards their pets is, yeah, it's very much their pets are their babies, kind of, but in a slightly different way to in the West. I don't think they anthropomorphize their pets the way we do in the West, but at the same time, things that we wouldn't think twice of in the West because we know they're for the best thing for the animal, they wouldn't necessarily do here because they think it hurts the animal. I'm trying to think of a specific example of that. So what have I had recently? Yeah, so I suppose things, if neutering is obviously one of them. That's a big thing here, that they're not big fans on, which is something that in the UK we wouldn't think twice about a lot of times, unless you're a man. I find men in the UK don't like castrating their dogs, but here the idea of putting an animal through surgery is just very alien, very, very alien, an elective surgery. And even kind of big surgeries where the animal is quite hurt, the kind of medical care would maybe be, I suppose a good example is a case I had recently where an animal came in for a castration but had a really horrific large wound that it had had for 10 days on its side. And he was remarkably well in himself. But that was something that just hadn't been mentioned to me even, I mean, it was sort of mentioned when the owner brought him as, oh yeah, he's got this wound on his side. He's had it for 10 days. And it was only when I anesthetized the dog to kind of examine the wound and potentially do the castration that I realized that, oh, this is really, really horrific, and we need to kind of figure this side out before we do anything else. And that, I think, the tolerance for, or the understanding of how uncomfortable things are, or the understanding of the medical side is less here, and so you see things a lot further on. Whereas in the UK, people will come to me because their dog's got a broken nail. Here, people don't come to me even, you know, unless their dog's leg has been hanging off for a month. And then I'm kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, we can try and fix this. Which is, yeah, it's a new challenge, and I enjoy that. That's kind of always where I envisaged my work being. In veterinary, I always wanted to kind of work in more challenging environments. So yeah, it's been good. Oh, Vicky, that's really kind. I actually, so my choices for sort of my work this year were to either go to Scandinavia and work there for sort of 3 to 6 months, or come here. And I ended up coming here, but I would love in the future at some point to go and work in Scandinavia and see that area as well. But yeah, I do miss my family. I do miss my family as well. I've got 2 nephews and a niece at home, and I absolutely love them. And I'm not the best at staying in touch over kind of phones and things like that. I'm not the best digitally, but they still remember me and they still ask after me. I make sure to go home quite regularly. A lot of people who are out here, they work on a kind of 6 on 2 off or something. I don't do that, but I will go home for 4 days if I get 4 days off, see my family. My parents actually recently came out here, which was nice. And although family is very, very important to me, I'm also quite happy with my own company. I really love being alone, which stands me in good stead. So that's, yeah, that is something that I am lucky and it definitely helps here. Lovely to see you enjoying the rain. Yes, I know it has been very nice the last 2 days. We've had a bit of rain and it's been a lot cooler, which has made life a little bit easier. Perfect. So I think, yeah, we've been on here for a while. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you so much for the questions. We'll do this again next week at the same time. So if you come up with any questions, or if you see anything and you want to ask about updates on any particular dogs or anything like that over the week, then just, yeah, come next week and we'll see you again. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you for all the questions. Have a great day.